This video is about the story of an African leader who for every day of his life dedicated himself to serving his people and fighting for their best interests. For all the 15 years he held political power of some sort, this African leader never put himself or his family first, but rather always prioritized the well-being and happiness of his people. Even when he was forced into exile by shameless traitors, this African leader chose not to spend time cooling off with his wife and children, but instead continued to dedicate himself fully to the task of liberating and unifying Africa. Despite having every opportunity to amass wealth and properties for himself and his family, this African leader never did so. And when he made a will for the few material possessions that he owned, he left nothing for his wife and children. Instead, he handed most of what he owned to the state. As you may have rightly guessed, the leader I am talking about is the first president of Ghana, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, a leader who fully embodied selflessness and service to his people. The current generation of Africans only know the reality of corrupt leaders who focus solely on enriching themselves and their families at the expense of their people. The highly inspiring examples of selfless leaders that Africa has also had is basically hidden, leaving Africans to falsely believe that every African leader must have been corrupt. Can you imagine an African leader who is in power for many years and after leaving power does not own a single house in his name? In the Africa of today, this is near impossible to even imagine, but that was exactly the case with President Nkrumah. From being elected as leader of government business in 1951 till February 1966 when he was deposed, President Nkrumah did not own a house in Ghana. Not even a single room anywhere in Ghana could be found in his name. This is in spite of the fact that he held political power for 15 consecutive years. This is the man who has been heavily demonized by his opponents and Western media as a despotic dictator. During his years in power, President Nkrumah constructed many housing projects all across Ghana to provide decent housing for his people. These housing projects include the township of Tema, the estates in Laboni, Kanda, Patase, Kwadaso, Bokrum, and many others. And yet, at no point did President Nkrumah decide to allocate one of the thousands of houses he built to himself. As a man with a wife and children, one could understand if he thought about them and built or allocated one house to them at least. But Osagyefo never saw things this way. For him, the well-being of his people always took precedence over his personal interests and that of his family. Now, here's an interesting but hidden story that perfectly captures the selflessness of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. In Ghana, presidents have a place that serves as a retreat known as Patrice Lodge. It is located in a town called Ebiri. Here is the very interesting history of how Patrice Lodge came to be. The original building was built as a home for President Nkrumah by market women who loved him and wanted him to have a place to call his own. But to the shock of the market women, President Nkrumah later decided to turn over ownership of the house they built for him to the state of Ghana. Here is President Nkrumah's own daughter, Samia Yaba Nkrumah, telling the story of how her father gave the house he owned to Ghana.
So we heard a lot of these denigrating comments. He amassed wealth, he did this, he did. And of course, we knew very well, being his own family, that was far from the truth. Even the house, the land was given to him, the house which he built with the help of strong women supporters, entrepreneurs at the time, which is today Patrice Lodge, where I was born, that could have been our house, but he gave it to the state. It's the property of the Republic of Ghana, receiving dignitaries just as he wanted it to be. So we, from personal experience, we knew that our father didn't amass wealth. Our father wasn't interested in those kind of things. In fact, he was a leader who exemplified courage, sense of purpose, vision, all the things we long for and we need to emulate in our lives. I mean, leaders across the board, all kinds of leaders.
Your father didn't have a house?
He did not. Strangely, incredibly, he did not.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a decision. Like everything he did, it was a political decision. Yes, I have a very interesting story about how those same women who helped him with the house, the construction of the house. Of course, it was much smaller, by the way. Over the years, it grew, so it wasn't so opulent, you know. But yeah, they were very angry when he gave it back to the state because they wanted him to have a place to go at weekends and, you know, with his family. And he explained to them. So everything he did was studied, was deliberate. He explained to them why he had to be above, superhuman almost, because, you know, he had to ask he intended to ask some of his ministers, close associates, to resign because of malfeasance. And so he had a reason for everything he did. And the fact that he decided not to make money out of politics was a deliberate, studied political decision.
I am sure many watching this video may be hearing this for the very first time, but that was how truly selfless President Nkrumah was. In his determination to build a nation of upright citizens, President Nkrumah went over and beyond to set the best example possible for his people. He embodied the selflessness, modesty, integrity, and honesty that he always preached. Following the Western-backed coup to oust President Nkrumah, his wife Fatia and their children were forced into exile in Egypt, where they lived for years. Several decades later, when Samia Nkrumah decided to return to Ghana for the first time, she faced a problem with finding accommodation because her father, who was the first Prime Minister and President of Ghana, did not own any house. This story was told by Major retired Osagyefo, who was one of President Nkrumah's aides during his years in exile in Guinea.
When we came back for some time, I've been in touch with Samia, and I'm proud to say that I was one of the people who contributed into Samia's coming back to this country. It was indeed in Italy. We were communicating. Eventually, when he was coming, who were the people who met Samia at the airport? The first time was Samia coming. Myself, one Senegalese, very close friend of, the father was a very close friend of Osagyefo. He was with us. Then Mike Egan. Were the three people that met Samia. The first time Samia was saving her food, the feed in the country. Then we thought of where Samia was going to be kept because they were having no property. Nkrumah had no property. Fortunately, Dr. Indum offered one of his hotel's rooms.
And that's where she stayed.
That's where Samia stayed.
And in a book written by Professor Bafo Agyemangua about the life and times of another Ghanaian leader, specifically General Champong, the story is told about how General Champong, who revered President Nkrumah, was determined to resettle and rehabilitate Nkrumah's family in Ghana. To achieve this, the general built a house for the wife and children of President Nkrumah in Accra. But there was to be a sad end to this heartwarming story, as in the early 1980s, the government of J.J. Rawlings confiscated the house that the general had built for the Nkrumah family. This forced Madam Fatia Nkrumah to take her children back to Egypt. Following the 1966 coup, the Ghanaian traitors, together with their Western masters, engaged in a vicious propaganda campaign to demonize President Nkrumah. They accused President Nkrumah of the worst possible crimes so as to justify their treasonous actions. Here is how President Nkrumah addressed the false claims of corruption against him in his own words. I am alleged to have stolen millions. In fact, I have no money outside Ghana, except for the sums which have been paid to me after the coup as royalties on my books, and which are now paid into the London branch of the National Commercial Bank of Scotland. I never handled any money personally for external or internal purposes, and this included my own salary. All drawing both on governmental and my personal accounts was countersigned by civil servants who were responsible to the Auditor General for all public expenditure and who for my own purposes recorded my personal expenditure. Any one of these officials could have provided a full and valid statement of how every penny was dealt with by the president's office and exactly how my salary was spent by me personally. If this had been done, it would have shown that I refused to accept as a political gesture any of the expense allowances allotted to the president by law. In the same way, if my will had been published in full, it would have shown that I left nothing even to my own family, but bequeathed everything I did possess to the party and the state. One can only wonder how a man with a family, more so an African leader, can consciously choose to never put them first, but rather always put his nation and people first. But that was how amazingly selfless President Nkrumah was. He believed that every African must submerge him or herself in service to the nation and mankind. President Nkrumah strongly disapproved of the African tradition that a man's first duty is to his family, as this leads to the nepotism and favoritism we see so much in Africa today. He believed very much in equality and justice, and that is why he worked hard to build a Ghana where every citizen, no matter who their parents were, had fair and equal opportunities. This is why in Osagyefo's Ghana, there was free education at all levels and free healthcare for all Ghanaians. With the industrialization that Ghana was rapidly undergoing, there were abundant employment opportunities for all Ghanaians, and there were in fact more jobs going to be created with there being plans to import labor into Ghana. In such a society, President Nkrumah did not have to amass riches for his children or give them an advantage, as they, like all Ghanaian children, had fair opportunities to work hard and become whatever they wanted to become. This was the meritocratic and equal society that President Nkrumah was working hard to build in Ghana. A society where who your parents are or where you are born plays no role in determining your chances in life. A society where the son of a farmer in the remotest village has the same or at least similar opportunities as the son of the president. This is very much unlike the present capitalist societies we live in, where the most important factor most of the time in determining who makes it in life and who does not is the family one is born into. No merit, no equality, and certainly no fairness. Even after he was forced into exile in 1966, President Nkrumah still continued to put the interest of Ghana and Africa above his own personal and family interests. Throughout his time in exile, he refused to allow his wife and children to even visit him in Guinea. Instead, he continued to dedicate himself fully to advancing the African Revolution by giving guidance to revolutionaries across Africa and by also writing books such as the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. This decision by the Osagyefo resulted in his wife and children not seeing him until 1972, when they attended his funeral in Conakry, Guinea, following his death. Now, here's another story that highlights the incredible selflessness of President Nkrumah. In the early days of his exile in Guinea, he received many letters of solidarity from some African leaders and citizens. One of these letters was from Oscar Kambona, who was then the Tanzanian Minister for Regional Administration. In the letter, the minister first salutes Osagyefo for all he has done for Africa and then offers his undying solidarity. The minister then informs Osagyefo of his decision to give up 1/3 of his salary to help Osagyefo pay for his expenses in Guinea. That part of the letter reads, "I have decided to give up 1/3 of my salary to help to pay your expenses in Guinea. I am sending a few pounds with Ambassador Bureau and will keep on sending some more. If there's anything you would like me to do, please let me know. I am in the service of Africa." A truly selfless gesture from the Tanzanian minister, Oscar Kambona. After receiving the money, guess what President Nkrumah decided to do with it? One would have expected that for a man who had not stashed money anywhere and virtually had nothing to depend on in exile, he would use the money for his expenses. But no, this is what Osagyefo chose to do instead. "I decided I would not make use of the money, but would keep it for my return to provide a scholarship for a Tanzanian student to study in one of the universities of Ghana. Another story that only further highlights the selfless commitment of the Osagyefo to ensure the well-being and progress of all Africans is seen in another letter he received in exile, this time from the president and founder of the Somali Agriculturist Cooperative Movement, Ibrahim Farah. In the letter, the writer recounts the crucial assistance President Nkrumah provided to his agricultural organization when they were in great difficulty. This is in spite of the fact that Osagyefo did not know them prior to their request for assistance. I hereby read that portion of the letter. Our agricultural cooperative was facing disaster at the time of the 1961 flood, but you saved us and made it possible for us to exist and face the future by granting us the vitally needed assistance, which was £3,000. From that day, the people of Somalia came to know you better, and also Ghana and Ghanaians. From that day, we understood that you are a genuine African leader because we arrived just from the blue. But when we told you about our difficulties, you never doubted us, and you helped us at a time when a person clearly distinguishes between friends and foes. And that is just one of many instances where President Nkrumah selflessly extended unconditional assistance to groups and organizations from all over Africa. Another act of President Nkrumah that highlights his selflessness was his relentless efforts to achieve a unification of Africa. There is no one who understood better how difficult the task to unite Africa was than President Nkrumah, but this did not deter him. He knew very well that his efforts to achieve African unity made him a target for the enemies of Africa, but this did not discourage him. President Nkrumah could have very well focused on his country Ghana and not have bothered about helping liberate other African countries. That surely would have earned him less enemies than he had and deprived his enemies of the propaganda that he was wasting Ghana's money assisting others. And after all, what was the personal benefit Osagyefo was going to gain from fighting a near impossible battle to achieve African unity? The main beneficiaries, if Africa should unite, will be the millions of African people who will have the protection of a unified Africa and all the enormous advantages that it comes with. For Osagyefo, his personal interest and safety did not matter. The best interest of Africans and Africa was what mattered to him the most. In Africa's history, there have been very few leaders who have advocated strongly for African unity, and all of these leaders have invariably been genuine and selfless leaders who worked for the best interest of their people. Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah is without a doubt the best example.
You see, the politician today doesn't have any true agenda to build Ghana. I'm telling you, I've worked with all of them. I worked with Nkrumah when they could too. I worked with Nkrumah at the Flagstaff House. I saw the man in action. He was selfless. He came to London in 1965, a year before he was overthrown. I was there, doing some course in Britain as a young officer. He stayed in one bedroom in Kwesi Ama's house, the High Commissioner's house. I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. One bedroom, like a poor, ordinary person. He had an agenda to invest the money to make Africa as good as the white man's was. Today, look at how you spend our money. What have you achieved since 1993, the coming into force of the fourth Republican Constitution? What have you achieved? I don't see anything. Anything substantial you can point to. Before you come to the throne, you can point to huge projects.
Unlike other African leaders from the past who amassed great wealth by shamelessly and heartlessly looting from their people, the example of the Osagyefo shows that Africa is not doomed to always have selfish and corrupt leaders. There is the famous example of Thomas Sankara and also other African leaders like Ahmed Sekou Toure, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and Julius Nyerere. The Pan-Africanist revolutionary Stokely Carmichael, who later changed his name to Kwame Toure, in honor of Presidents Nkrumah and Sekou Toure, had this to say about the selfless leadership of the two men. My two fathers may be, along with the sainted Nyerere, the only African heads of states in contemporary times who went to their ancestors much as they came into the world. That is without leaving vast personal estates and Swiss bank accounts behind. At his death, Sekou Toure did not own even as much as a house in Conakry. That kind of personal integrity is almost unheard of in politicians anywhere, and especially much to our sorrow in modern Africa. Anyone who learns about the inspiring stories of selflessness of these African leaders is likely to applaud them. But ironically, the uprightness of President Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara, Sekou Toure and others rather made them endangered species, as they were subjected to relentless attacks to demonize and eliminate them. Had they sold out like Mobutu and many others, Thomas Sankara and Kwame Nkrumah most likely would have lived and ruled for many more years and enjoyed great wealth, even as their people suffered. That is the cruel and upside-down world we live in. Capitalism, they call it. A world where it is good to be bad and bad to be good. But a better world is certainly possible. And as Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said in the closing paragraph of his book Dark Days in Ghana, if for a while the imperialists appear to be gaining ground, we must not be discouraged, for time is on our side. The permanency of the masses is the deciding factor, and no power on earth can prevent its ultimate decisive effect on the revolutionary struggle. Please do support us by liking this video and sharing it to others. Also, do share your thoughts in the comment section and don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Thank you for watching.